So this is a follow-up of our, I think, January 2019 interview, which is on YouTube and we're transcribing. And I wanted to ask you about the Society for Scientific Exploration Colorado conference in June of this year.
Hmm.
The theme was consilience because you are trying to formulate an alternative to the materialist paradigm of science that has to do with consciousness, but nobody knows what consciousness means, so we're trying to fill that in. So what came out of the conference about consilience?
Well, it'd be unrealistic to expect the solution.
Oh.
uh, that could take a couple of weeks instead of one. But I was trying to get the SSE to change its thinking a little bit to move away from the traditional sense of anomalies studies, where you're pointing out that something is wrong, to ask the follow-up question: is there any way to put Humpty Dumpty back together again? So if I look at healing studies, or I do healing studies, and there's a traditional biologist in the room, the traditional biologist is going to be flopping on the floor going, this doesn't make any sense. If you do water studies and the memory of water, a traditional chemist will flop on the floor and it won't make any sense, and on and on. So what the SSE has been doing for the past 40 years or so is looking at things that don't make sense and saying that we should be allowed to do this. And so there are all sorts of phenomena out there in the world that don't make sense according to the textbooks in the traditional disciplines. And the question is, should we be allowed to work on that? And the answer is yes, of course. And we have a Journal of Scientific Exploration, and we have a magazine, Edge Science, and we have wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conferences. And so I just challenged people and said, that's beautiful. All these anomalies have tremendous amounts of data behind them. So the world is not the way we think it is. How is the world? And what do we need to do, and how do we start thinking about how to put it back together again? And I liken the analogy to Galileo and Copernicus. Galileo was a pain. An annoying guy, and fortunately he was thrown in prison and persecuted and all that stuff, as he should, because he's an annoying guy who went and bought a telescope at Kmart and looked up and said, this is screwy up there, it doesn't make sense. And our textbooks and our teachings and our scholars and our gods and everybody else don't, something's wrong up there. And so Galileo was destructive, and that's not a criticism; it's a description.
Right.
And so Galileo was destructive in that he was pointing out things that are wrong, and that's a beautiful thing. But enough already. What's right? And so a Copernican revolution tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again and say, how do we take all the weird stuff we see? How do we put it back together, and how do we make a model of the way things work? And Copernicus was wrong too, so that's fine. Just as Einstein will be wrong, and just as quantum physics will be wrong, and it's all going to be wrong. But the attempt to put it together in terms of a model, I'm calling constructive. And if we're going to be constructive and we're going to look at all this stuff, consilience implies that we're going to take information all over the place. So we want to look at the physical sciences and the social sciences and the humanities, and let's look all over the place and see what can you contribute to putting the world back together again. Now, what we put together again, I have no illusion is going to be that it's going to be right. But let's balance. I think we've gotten slightly out of balance, tearing down and going, haha, you're wrong, to how about, haha, let's try this. And so I think that will be the what a scientific revolution is.
So what kind of
And I don't think
clues?
there's been a scientific revolution for a very long time. So you get the first half of the 20th century, I think, is certainly more productive in terms of scientific revolutions than the second half. And so the real fundamental changes in the way we think the world works, they haven't been around for a long time. And so I'm saying to the SSE folks, the Galileans, the people who are a pain in the butt, okay, how do you put it back together? What do you need? What are the parts? And so it was wonderful, and I think it struck a nerve that we had over 80 submissions of people around the world wanting to speak. We didn't have 80 slots, but we had over 80 submissions, and we had a vibrant poster session and vibrant talks, and it was a lot of fun.
All right.
SSE is can be a whole lot of fun. The biggest downside of the meeting was I unfortunately was reelected president for another term.
Congratulations.
Oh well, so I'm looking for an escape hatch. It's time for me to be paroled.
Well, you got another year. I'm dying to hear some of the clues. What out of those 80 proposals, what were the themes that came up in this consilience effort?
Well, and I don't mean to evade here, but I would say if anybody is listening or reading or doing whatever, that you go to scientificexploration.org and you'll see all the abstracts and you'll see all of the talks and get a sense of the program, because it was sometimes the Wild West and sometimes interesting and sometimes kind of like setting the stage for what needs to be done. So there's the gross contrasting point of view in my mind between materialism and post-materialism is more annoying to me than anything else. It's not helpful. To say something is post-materialist, what does that mean? It doesn't tell you what it is, it tells you what it isn't.
Right.
So I'm not materialist. Well, okay, what are you? Well, I'm post-materialist. That's not particularly useful. It's like in some of the humanities, they talk about postmodern. What does postmodern mean? It has no meaning. Does postmodern mean tomorrow? Does post-materialist mean... I have no content from post-materialists.
Okay, we know consciousness, spirit.
Yeah, but
mind.
What does that mean? I don't even know what in heaven's name consciousness is. So if you say it's a consciousness model, that's better to me than a post-materialist model. We can talk in classical terms of materialism and reductionism and all those kinds of things, and I think it's reasonably well understood at this point that physics is physics, and you're looking at stuff, but that's not going to tell you much about chemistry. Chemistry somehow is a magical emergent property. That's assumed. And if I know about chemistry and I know about physics, I still don't know much about biology. So biology has to be studied on its own terms. But chemistry, without reflection, is assumed to magically come out of physics. And biology is supposed to magically come out of physics and chemistry. And then people stuff is magically coming out of physics and chemistry and biology, and somehow a mind comes magically into being, and consciousness comes magically into being as an emergent property. That's the short version of materialism. What post-materialism is anybody's guess, but I think they simply take the emergent property sequence and they stick consciousness as the first step.
Right.
So consciousness magically gives rise to stuff.
Yeah.
See, that's not helpful. Maybe it's the case, maybe it is. Maybe consciousness is primary, but it's not telling you how that occurs. So you start with, first a miracle occurs. And the miracle which occurs could be consciousness. That's the primary. But that's a religious statement.
Yeah.
I believe first there was consciousness. In the beginning there was consciousness.
The word.
And consciousness begat, which begat. So we got a whole lot of begatters.
Yeah.
And you go down a causal sequence of begats, starting from the primary first cause. That's also Thomas Aquinas in the 12th century. So this is a proof of the existence of God, the uncaused cause. Okay, well, what's the uncaused cause? Consciousness. What's the uncaused cause? The Big Bang. It's the same thing. So now we talk about a Big Bang, which began as a pejorative, somebody making fun of what it all started in the Big Bang, and said, "Yeah, that works." And so the entire universe was down to
A P.
And whether you call that first and you say that was consciousness coming into being, or you say that was God coming into being, or that was creation coming into being, you're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the difference is between this, that, and the other. And so that's what I mean by it's unsatisfying. So the Big Bang gives us a religious assurance, or based upon a religious set of assumptions, the belief that we understand then the sequence of what goes on. But you haven't solved the Big Bang. And so physics as primary doesn't solve where it came from. Consciousness as primary doesn't solve where it came from, and maybe we're just asking the wrong questions. Maybe we ought not to ask where it all came from. I don't know the right questions. So consilience, I eventually get to your question. And so consilience is, if we say, where can we look around and ask the right questions? What kind of questions do we need to do to bring this all back together again? Are we trying to explain everything? Are we trying to explain creation? The Big Bang is kind of arrogant. It's arrogant. We got the whole thing down to, and first there was, and then we look at the sequence after, a very, 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 very small length of time. So what happened in the first gazillionth of a second? I don't know. But the second gazillionth of a second, now I got it and I can put it in equations, but that's not going to solve where it came from. These are still mysteries. Especially
because some people think there's multi-universes and like contraction and expansion, kind of like Hindu kalpas, and that it just repeats. The universe decays and then it big bangs again and decays. So we don't even know that this is the only universe and it's only happened once.
Yeah. And the history of thought about all this stuff is that the reality, if there is such a thing, reality is always bigger than we can think. So in Einstein's day, the galaxy was thought to be the whole universe. I mean, that's what Einstein thought. This was the whole thing, and it always was. It never came into being, and it couldn't come into being, and it was permanent, and it was perfect, and it was one. The universe was the galaxy, and there was, the idea of a second galaxy is bizarre, and the idea of it having a beginning was bizarre, and this is Einstein.
I didn't know that.
At the beginning, so he had his series of assumptions about what's possible, and then from that you derive and you move on from there. Well, our current set of assumptions is a little bit different, and we latch on to something. But my quibble, as it were, is that pay attention to what you're really able to explain and what you're not able to explain. So consciousness is primary. Okay. I don't know what consciousness is, and I don't know what makes it primary. And it's like people talking about quantum this and quantum that. It drives me crazy. So what in heaven's name does quantum this mean or quantum that mean?
It just means little tiny packet.
Means little tiny stuff. Yeah. So little tiny stuff, and odd things happen when you get to little tiny stuff. But if you latch onto that, with I'm going to call it religious fervor. And you give yourself the delusion that you understand. So in Einstein's time, there was one galaxy. Now the latest estimate I heard, who knows, there's a trillion.
Trillions, yeah.
Now a trillion galaxies, that's more than four. It's a lot. And what do you do with a trillion galaxy? I mean, you can't comprehend that.
That are accelerating and expanding.
And then, you got nothing. You got nothing to go with a trillion galaxies. If you think about how many galaxies there are and how many stars there are, your head will explode. And maybe this is one of a trillion universes. And maybe the trillion universes are all doing different things. And maybe, you just keep going and then your head explodes. And so even the materialists say, well, fiddle faddle, if we're looking at the cosmos, we can only account for about 4% of stuff.
Yeah, the rest is dark energy and dark matter. They don't really know what it is.
Yeah, which is like saying first a miracle occurred.
Yeah.
So your current miracle is dark matter and dark energy. Now maybe we'll find out that dark matter and dark energy are, or maybe we'll find out they are, or maybe we'll find out, or maybe it's consciousness. Who the hell knows, And consciousness of what? So it's going to be bigger than we think. It's going to be more interesting than we think. And our little current understanding by our little pea brains is you have more fun going, ooh, ah, how wondrous that might be. And I have no idea.
So, but at the conference, out of these 80 proposals, there must have been some themes in terms of what is the alternative to materialist approach. There got to be some themes.
Oh yeah, but you call it post-materialist. You talk about consciousness as primary. You talk about meaning fields. You talk about all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I don't want to shortchange anything. And the stuff we do is public. And I would say get on and play. I mean, the entire conference is going to be online in a very short period of time, I hope. We're putting our videos, we're putting our this on, we're putting our that on, and we're unlocking all of our past conferences. And this conference will be unlocked and available to the to at least members. I hope within a couple of months. And I don't want to give a simple plot because the ideas are more complex than that.
Okay.
And to say the themes. Well, the themes go along to the post-materialist consciousness model, this, that, and the other. Again, that's not necessarily satisfying to me, but it's important, And so, what would be required in order to have a comprehensive model? Well, I don't want to pick on anybody. I'm particularly enamored with the idea of meaning fields. Which is a development coming out of some folks.
It's the Imad Baruch. However you say
Imad
his name.
Baruch, yeah. His stuff is beautiful.
Yeah, I read his manuscript.
Yeah, it's worth taking. It's worth paying attention to. Now he's not right. That's crazy talk, but he's seriously interesting. And kind of expands upon Sheldrake's morphic fields and I think brings consciousness into the play of the general model. I mean, it's. I mean, who knows where that's going to lead? But it's pretty interesting.
What's also interesting is he can't find a publisher for that book.
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to get a wide. He's not going to get a wide audience for it. There are folks who run around saying quantum and then they're happy. If you don't say quantum at least once an hour, you're not enlightened.
You can say quantum meaning fields. It's all right.
No, but I'm just saying that there are people who just quantum.
Yeah.
And now they're happy and they think they're scientific and all that kind of stuff. It has nothing behind it whatsoever. And I'm being sufficiently annoying, I think, and saying the same thing about post-materialist. If you take materialism as a way of looking at the world, and then you go, physics and chemistry and biology somehow miraculously giving rise to mind, which somehow miraculously gives rise to consciousness.
Right.
And you invert that and you put consciousness as primary, and then you say, oh, isn't that terrific? I don't know that you're going to be satisfied with yourself, but I don't know that you're going to be particularly satisfied when you start putting that against the data. And so, for example, if you put up Copernicus and you look enough, you're going to say, well, that doesn't make sense. If before Copernicus you put up Ptolemy and you look up and you say, well, that doesn't make sense. Is Copernicus better than Ptolemy? Yes, but has he got anything really going? Does he have something without anomalies? No. If you look at relativity, do you have no anomalies? No. If you look at quantum, is all anomalies. The whole friggin' thing is anomalistic. But you're not solving anything. So if we're going to be data based, so let's say and this was really the basis of what I prattled on about. I said I was doing a rant against materialism, post-materialism. And so if you take materialism with what it is alleged to accept, and you take post-materialism, it's alleged to accept, and so I am a card-carrying materialist, and I'm a card-carrying whatever you call post-materialist, and I just start looking at my healing data, just mine. Forget everybody's, just mine. So I've done, a couple of studies, and in my couple of studies...
16, right?
Oh, no, I have several hundred, but I have 18 mice experiments.
Okay.
But I have many other studies. But if you just look at my stuff and now contrast it with, here I am, this card-carrying materialist, and they're having a fight with the card-carrying post-materialist. And they usually talk past each other, so they, no, you're an idiot, no, you're an idiot, okay, everybody's an idiot, so that's fine. But now if we just look at this, and now I'm going to be Galileo. So we got materialists here who have a model of the way the world works, and we got post-materialists who have a model of the way the world works, and I'm going to be the pain in the butt Galileo. So I'm going to tell you, and I could back this up, but it would take a lot of time and be a separate talk. But just put yourself in this mindset and that mindset. And I'm going to suggest that I have compelling data, even to me as a skeptic. So I'm saying, if I'm going to say something, I have independent verification in independent labs at independent times, that even a skeptic like myself can say, well, I'm going to have to go with this until somebody can show me I'm wrong. Healing doesn't diminish with distance. It doesn't. So if I do an experiment here, and I got a cage of mice, and I do an experiment, and I got at 2,000 miles away, it doesn't diminish. Now, how would the materialist think about that? And how would the non-materialist or the post-materialist think about that? That's my question. And I'm not pretending to give you the answer. I'm saying that
non-locality, right?
So if I look up with the telescope and I look at the skies and I go, well, drat, look at that. That's interesting. Mercury just changed direction. How do I account for that? What do I have to do to make the world complete, safe? If healing doesn't diminish with distance. And so let's keep going. I can also tell you that there's a dose response to healing. So when I say healing doesn't diminish with distance, and the non-locality people start going, yay, and all that kind of stuff, and we'll put that in post-materialist. But now I'm going to flip it around and say, here I can say with reasonable certainty, there's a dose response. Healing doesn't magically happen. There's a minimum dose per problem, per condition, per what your target is, and it runs, and there are both dose response curves to healing. Now the materialist is going, yay. You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that without question, I've got sufficient data that healing is nonlinear.
It can go
And
forward and backward in time.
I don't know. I haven't nailed down the time thing. So I'm working on how to design an experiment to see if it doesn't follow the laws of distance, it probably or may not follow the laws of time, but I don't have that nailed. So I'm not going to say anything because I'm only talking about things that I'm reasonably confident about. So I'm speculatively interested in the relationship of healing to time, but I don't have it nailed down. But I do have nailed down that it doesn't diminish with distance. I do have nailed down that there is a conventional dose response to healing.
And does dose mean time spent in the healing process?
Yes, it's also dependent on the strength of what you're delivering.
Well, okay, so I have to spend at least a half an hour doing the cycling thing with the intent that the cancer cell tumor goes away.
Something along those lines. But yeah, I'm not going with a half hour, but yeah, something along those lines. That would be the plot, and I would just take out the intention part.
Okay.
I would say
But
healing.
don't you have to have the intention to do the healing? Because like
No,
the guy who was embarrassed about doing it, his intention wasn't to heal. His intention was, don't let anybody see me with my hands on this stupid mice cage.
yeah. So his intention was to hide.
Yeah.
If you're putting your hands around a cage of mice, you have an intention. You don't need to do more than that. I think you're confusing attention with intention.
Mm. Okay.
I don't think attention means anything at all. Intention does. But intention is fleeting, and you'll never know when your intention intended. If you're doing anything, you're intending. If I'm walking across the room, I'm intending. I don't need to attend. I don't need to pay attention to walking across the room. And I don't know when I decided to do so.
But at some point you need to think, I want to heal the mice. You
No.
can't just...
In some point, you act as if you want to heal the mice.
And that sets up the dose.
No, that sets up the healing.
So does the dose mean time spent doing the process? What does dose mean?
Dose means time spent doing the process, and dose also means the different delivery systems of bringing the process to bear. So I'm taking out the human element in my recent research, and producing that, and that's going to have a different dose response than if I have a human element. Plus time is a factor. Plus, who knows? So I'm going to say that, and again, you contrast the materialist and the post-materialist. And both of them are full of it, So that's essentially what I'm saying here. That's the take-home message. You can't. It's too simple, and so healing occurs in non-linear bursts. So nothing happens, and then suddenly there's a change. So in the case of mice with cancerous tumors, the tumors get bigger. We're trying to make them smaller. The tumors are getting bigger, and then they disappear. How would the materialist, non-materialist think about that? Well, I don't know. Here's one. The more aggressive the cancer, the quicker it's fixed.
Because there's more energy involved. You can zap it because there's more concentration.
Well, I'm just saying we got to, if we're going to put together a model, that has to be part of it. So if I've got a hyper-aggressive cancer, it's going to be fixed much faster than a slow-growing cancer.
It kind of makes sense because there's more energy involved.
It depends the way you think about the way the world works. And I'm just putting it up and saying if the materialist and the non-materialist were yelling at each other and trying to say the other is an idiot, and I said doesn't diminish with distance,
but it's
we
dose.
both have to grapple with that. We both have to grapple with dose response. We both have to grapple with nonlinear response. We have to grapple with something that even mice in the experiment which are not treated are going to get a treatment as a resonant bonding phenomenon.
If you said in your previous talk, if they're part of the same group.
Yeah.
But you haven't done it with mice who don't have the same parents or whatever. who are
Oh
separate?
no, we've done it with mice that don't have the same parents, but if they're part of my experiment, then I think that there's a bonding effect and there's a group phenomenon wherein if I treat one, I treat them all,
But even if they've never been connected physically in the same room.
even if they've never been connected physically. Yep, yep.
But just it's enough to be part of this concept of this experiment. Somehow they're included because the experimenter knows their placebo control group out in
Yeah,
some other
yeah.
place.
So
But if you didn't know, I think you said that your students had included rats that you didn't know about, and
yes,
they got cured, but
they
they
got
knew
cured
about it.
too. They
But
got
they knew.
cured. So there's reasonable. It's reasonable to assume there's an actual, real physical bonding of spatially separate groups
And in resonance.
in a resonance,
Yeah,
and this is going to mimic a placebo effect.
right.
So let's throw that into the mix. I think that I've shown placebo effects in mice, and I think I've shown placebo effects in cell cultures.
Wow.
So how is the materialist and the post-materialist going to make sense of either one of them? How are they going to make sense of that?
How do you make sense of it? You just
I'm
don't
not.
know.
I'm ducking the question. I'm saying that the materialist post-materialist is a false choice
Okay.
that people latch on to. But who cares? I mean, it's not who cares. But let's not pretend the materialists are dopes and the post-materialists are enlightened.
Okay.
And the same thing, the post-materialists, the materialists shouldn't assume the post-materialists are dopes and they're enlightened.
Right.
Everybody's full of it.
Okay.
And so now we're going to consilience. How do we remake the world to take, for example, just these data? This is not trivial.
No.
So again, the analog is I'm looking up and I'm seeing, well, that planet just changed direction. What in heaven's name is going on? We got to think about the way the world works. Well, what in heaven's name happens if you get placebo effects in cell cultures? What are we saying? And what model could possibly make sense? What model could possibly think that would be predicted?
Well, because quantum physics says that there's entanglement, so somehow those cell cultures were entangled.
Yeah, but if the mice are entangled and then they're not entangled, quantum physics wouldn't say that. And this is what I mean by this is nonsensical stuff, to call it quantum. So entanglement is a one-directional process, but we find out that we can unbond the relationship among mice and cell cultures.
How do you know that they're unbonded?
Well, we have mice that are apparently going and then they're withdrawn from the group and they die. We have mice that are dying and they're visited by someone who knows the technique and they live. It's fluid. There is no entanglement in mice. There's bonding and unbonding.
There's intention and non-intention.
And there's bonding and there's non-bonding. And so to say it's quantum is just to throw out a word that says, okay, we're safe.
Okay.
But it has no relationship to the data. It has no relationship to the patterns. It's simply a statement, if you're relying on quantum things, that's analogous to a religious statement. Let's believe this. And if we believe this, we're safe and we don't have to think about it anymore. Let's believe the Big Bang and we'll say we're safe. We've now understood creation. Well, you haven't. Give me a break.
But doesn't it work because quantum physics tells us that potentiality only collapses if there's observation or measurement? And isn't that the same thing that you're doing with the mice or the cells? There's measurement or intention, and then you get an effect.
There's measurement and intention. There's also resonant bonding with mice we don't know about, have no intention about, and are completely mysterious about.
Well, where are those mice that you don't know about?
Oh, they're at some place in the building.
So someone hides some mice from you that you don't know about. But
Yep,
they knew about it. But somebody knew. Somebody knew. So someone has to know.
Somebody has to know, yeah. Well, if the universe is consciousness and consciousness collapses a wave function, how can you not collapse a wave function?
Right.
How can you have any part of any reality that is not involving consciousness? In which case, the quantum metaphor of collapsing the wave function, if everything is consciousness, now takes on no meaning at all.
I guess it only takes meaning when it's a photon. But if you're talking about big things like a mouse, then it doesn't work.
But apparently similar phenomena occur. So we have to take this into consideration. We have to make sense of it. So if you're going to quantum me, you're not going to make any sense if you reflect on this to some depth.
Okay.
If you resonant bond, which is what the term I like to use, it similarly doesn't explain anything. What the hell's resonant bonding, for crying out loud? I don't know what it means. And I just mean, that's what I mean. You're bonded. Now you're not bonded. I mean, what's the mechanism of the bond? I don't know. I'm completely full of it.
Okay. Larry Dossey at the Institute of Noetic Sciences conference in July said that your work is the best healing work in the world. So my question is, has anybody else besides you used your techniques without you being involved? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what kind of replication have you seen?
I don't know about the lab replication. That's hard to do, but anecdotally on people, they're doing it all over the world.
So people who studied with you are doing healing work.
People who don't study with me, people who learn my stuff from publications.
Or your CD.
People, the CDs, yeah. People. I mean, I just gave a workshop, and we have a community forum on the website where people are reporting their results all the time. So I mean, I don't know about these people. I don't even know what a website is. I've never looked at this. I'm told that all this stuff is going on. I mean, I don't believe it. I'm a skeptic, but it's certainly not dependent on me.
But why hasn't someone done it? It's not that hard to inject mice with these cancer cells and then spend a half an hour to an hour doing the cycling process. Why haven't other labs done it? Because that needs to happen.
It's unbelievably difficult to do it.
Why?
Well, I'll just tell you right now, and I mean right now, I already have funding to do mice research, so I'm well funded. I can't find a lab to do it.
You said you had trouble with animal people who don't want tumors in mice?
I can't find a lab to do it. And I'm talking, I've been everywhere in the country. I don't think you could stump me. I've also been throughout Europe. I'm poking now in Asia.
What's their
and
reason?
The animal people don't want mice to be experimented on if tumors get above a certain size. They used to, but now they don't.
But if they get
and
healed,
the size that allowable tumors is actually shrinking. So I was in communication with somebody from, I'll just say, very well-known research place, cancer research place, that also does immunotherapy. The immunotherapy department is being shut down. The research department for immunotherapy is being shut down.
Because
when you apply immunotherapy, the tumors get big before they collapse. When you do my stuff, the tumors get big before they collapse. And they won't allow the tumors to get big. So I just had a study aborted in Providence at Brown because the tumors got over the allowable size, even though I expected that they would get above the allowable size. And the veterinarian and every observer says the mice were not suffering. They were happy, feeding themselves, drinking, playing around in the cage, doing all that stuff. They just had big, ugly tumors. And the animal people came in and killed them. I just submitted a couple of weeks ago the remnants of that study to a journal, a biology journal, because we were able to salvage some tissue and some blood and some organs and things like that. So a paper will come out about this experiment. But I'm telling you now, you ask about how hard is it to do mice. I can't figure out a way to do it so far.
So the process isn't hard.
The research is being shut down.
But the process is not hard and could be replicated. It's the problem is the size of the tumors for the animal rights people.
The animal rights people are shutting down research. And I'll say it that simply. They're shutting down research.
Right.
And you know, that's going to have implications for itself.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You have set up experiments with maybe 38 kinds of detectors because you're trying to find a non-human technique to do healing work. So what have you found? This is what you've called like a bottled cure. What have you found?
Well, we found a number of things. One, and again, there's already a publication out on the effect of the recording of healing intention and its effect on cancer cells in vitro. We found that we looked at 167 genes, cancer genes, and the playing of this recording produces significant genomic changes in 68 of them. It does it reliably. We have 7 iterations. We found that dose response is slightly less potent than is the treatment of the cancer cells live. So we've captured something, but we probably haven't captured the whole thing. We're sure that we can bottle up intention and replay it.
So it's a sound? It's a sound?
It's not a sound.
How do you play something?
Well, you simply play it through speakers, but there's no sound at all. We had 38 different kinds of detectors in a Faraday cage. Again, the technical details are in the paper. We recorded the act of charging cotton by 3 people using my cycling method, and the playback of that recording, it's a very, very complex recording. It was reduced to a stereo signal. There's no sound, but playing it to a cancer cell produces significant genomic changes in the cancer cell. The aborted study we just did in Providence was playing the recording to cancerous mice, and it was also producing, it appeared, it was going along the path that we'd expect if this were to work. So we're looking to see if we can make a scalable delivery system for healing that takes out the human element to some extent and thereby makes it much more scalable. We can make it global.
So the idea is that you capture the signal from humans and then bottle it, so to speak, deliver it through speakers. So it's like kind of like a vaccination or something. You get it from the original source and then duplicate it and inoculate someone.
Well, inoculate is too strong a word, but yes. So can we reproduce the cancer cure and probably the Alzheimer's cure and probably, I mean, you know, we successfully treat a lot of things. Can we reproduce that without the healer and make it, you know, a scalable delivery system? That's really the question.
And you're saying yes.
Well, I'm saying so far it's extremely suggestive. I'm trying to be conservative.
Right.
But it's extremely suggestive that something can be done, whether it is whether we have an alternative or a complementary system here. We don't know yet because we haven't done a survival study. That's the mouse study that was just aborted. If it's an alternative treatment, then it would cure in and of itself. If it's a complementary treatment, it would produce some benefit, but it would be complementary to something else. We don't know what that something else would be yet, so it's a little too early to tell. But something is going on. There's no question something is going on. And if you do a deep dive signal analysis of what's being played to the cancer cells or the mice, there's nothing there that would account for the biological responses.
Wow.
There's nothing at all. So again, I go back to my materialist and my post-materialist, and I said, if you looked at this data output from an electrical engineering point of view, a signal analysis, nobody would have any idea what to make of what's going on. So we're going to put together a paper in the next short period of time that is a signal analysis, but that'll simply add to another mystery.
So I'm trying to understand what a signal is. It involves waves. I mean, is it like wavelengths, like brain wavelengths or frequencies, or is it like light waves, or what is it? Is there an analogy to what this signal is like?
The analogy would be it would be extreme. The interesting anomalous bursts that we find when we look at the output from the recording suggests that the interesting phenomena are occurring at extremely low frequencies, very extremely low frequencies, like 3.5 to 5 hertz. Uh, the among the layered anomalies that occur here are that 3.5 to 5 hertz you couldn't hear. I mean, a human can't hear 3.5 to 5 hertz. A speaker would have to be monstrous in size with a monstrous amount of power to play 3.5 to 5 hertz. No one could hear it, but we have little tiny speakers that fit into an incubator, so they're not playing 3.5 to 5 hertz. So we don't know what's being played and how the transmission is going on. So we reduce this. Now I go back to my materialist, post-materialist. The materialist dissects the signal. The dissection of the signal has nothing to do, it certainly can't account for healing at 2,000 miles. They would be really short, non-particularly energetic bursts that are more likely to be secondary correlates of the healing phenomenon. But the mechanism of delivery, and even whether delivery is the right way to think of this, is completely unknown. So it is a reliable phenomenon, but whose mechanism we try to fit into the boxes we understand, but they don't fit. I mean, they don't fit at all. So once again, if I'm a materialist or I'm a post-materialist, we don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, this would be the very short period of time. And incidentally, that's the case. I mean, we got 38 different detectors running inside a Faraday cage, with a monstrous database reduced to a wave file. We can do the same thing running random number generators in a room where we're treating cancerous mice. If we treat cancerous mice and they have cancer and we run a random number generator, it doesn't generate random numbers.
Wow.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
If you run a geomagnetic probe in the room and you're treating cancerous mice, the probe produces anomalous output. If the mice don't have cancer, it behaves normally. If the mice don't have cancer, the random number generator behaves normally. But if there's a need present, then this stuff happens automatically.
Wow.
Now, how do you now go back to here's my materialist, here's my post-materialist. Can anybody make sense of this?
Do the rings record the anomalous curves if no human is in the room?
Do the first part of the question again?
So the rings, when the healing process is going on, the rings produce.
I don't know what you mean by rings.
Random number generators.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
When they produces these like bell curves instead of the random zeros and ones, do they do that even when the humans aren't doing the healing intention? When the mice are by themselves in the room?
Oh, you mean what's the output of a random number generator?
Do they have the anomalous output if the humans aren't specifically involved in the room?
Just because the mice have cancer.
Even if the humans aren't there?
Yeah, if the mice have cancer and there's no human there, I don't think we've done a formal study that way. We've simply had the human there as the primary agent and then had mice with and without cancer. So when mice with cancer are there and the human is there with a healing intention, then the random number generator doesn't produce normal output.
Right. And it's the same kind of output as the Princeton pair studies where people are focused on New Year's or Princess Di's death or something, then you get these big bell curves.
Well, it's not. It's not. Nah, no. Um, the bell curve is a cumulative output that would be there whether the random number generator was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. In other words, if you're interfering with the random number generator or not. So the bell curve distribution is an output. What happens when intention shifts towards ones or zeros or high or low or whatever the thing is also a bell curve. So it's a bell curve whether you're trying to move it or not. The bell curve, the curve, this is a technical question. The bell curve itself doesn't change in terms of a significant skewness. So you don't suddenly get this, not bell curve looking thing. Rather, what you have on the bell curve is a mean shift. So the distribution remains the same, but the mean shift of the expected outcome is moved. So it's not you're shifting the bell curve to something that is no longer a normal looking bell curve. The normal bell curve has a mean shift on the distribution on the x-axis. And so it's a little bit different than you're suggesting.
Got it. But the point is, it shifts if there's a human in there, and
it shifts. Yeah.
Cancer, mice with cancer.
Yeah. So again, we go back to our materialist or non-materialist or this or that, and I can just keep going. So let's say we're having a fight. Here's a ditty. Experiment. The faster they all get cured. Make sense out of that.
Wait, say that again.
The more mice in an experiment, the faster they'll collectively be cured.
So it just sounds like it's a concentration of energy phenomenon.
Well, why are 75 mice curable faster than 25?
Because they create a bigger field. Just like if you have spend more time on them or the cancer is more virulent, it's all about more energy that you have to work with.
So does the materialist have fun because you're talking about energy, or does the post-materialist have fun because and where is the consciousness that you see? No matter what you do, you're going to be slapping yourself in the head and not knowing what's going on.
Well, in a way, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the mice get cured.
No, what matters is our understanding of it. And so that's what you're asking in consilience. What's the question in consilience? How do you make sense of things? If you're talking about quantum, you're trying to make sense of things. So we don't care about mice normally. We just like to go around with the illusion that we understand the way the world works. And I'm suggesting no matter what model you have, I can poke it apart.
Yeah. And I'm suggesting it doesn't really matter what the model is. What matters is that you're working on a healing technique that works.
Yeah. So you've changed the question.
Yeah.
In which case, you wouldn't care about consilience. The only thing you care about is the number of cured mice.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
A scientific question would be, how does this work?
Right.
And you're negating the science, even as you call upon quantum things for an umbrella.
Well, no, because you want to know how it works so you could replicate it. But the fact is,
No, knowing how it works doesn't mean you can replicate it.
You just need to know the technique that works.
That doesn't explain it.
Right. Yeah. Got it. When you've talked about what makes healing work, you've said you have to have fun, you have to want it, there has to be a need on the part of the healing thing. So it seems like what you're saying is that you need to set the intention and then get your mind, your thought process out of the way.
Yeah, you're changing the question from how does it work to how do you make it work?
Right.
So I completely agree with me. Yes. What you said, I completely agree with me. Yeah, whatever you just said is exactly right.
So when you charge cotton, not with any kind of device or anything, but when you have cotton on your strained Achilles tendon, what do you do to charge it?
Hold it and cycle.
So in essence, Bill Benston's theory is hold it and cycle.
No, it's not a theory at all. It's a process.
Process.
That if you want it to work, that's the best way I have to make it work. Now, if someone can come up with something better, I'm all ears. That's a beautiful thing.
But the cycling, all that it does, it seems to me, is get your left brain out of the way.
Oh no, it doesn't get your left brain out of the way at all. I have ample EEG and functional MRI data to show you're not getting your left brain out of the way at all. You're not distracting yourself at all. You're not doing anything even remotely like that.
What are you doing?
That's the question.
So I'm thinking.
So what happens is the brains of the healer and the healee become phase locked with each other. Now, what does that have to do with the healing? I don't know. And what's the brain of a cell culture?
Okay. It's only 9, so my grandson is here.
Yeah. So it's so I can look at brains phase locking. I can look at, and I can look at where in the brain cycling is alleged to be located, and I have. But what does the brain have to do with healing? I mean, I do EEGs and functional MRIs because I have the toys to play with them, but I don't know if brains have anything to do with healing. Maybe it's all healing is in the little toe. Maybe all healing is in the spleen. Maybe all healing is in, who knows? Maybe it's in your fascia. I don't know how healing works. I don't know if there's receptors. I don't even know if receptors is the right term to use. But if you look at brains, you see stuff going on. But I can tell you for sure that cycling is not turning on or off any part of the brain. An interesting signal appears in the brain that I'm told is unique, but I don't know what that has to do with healing either.
What is a signal? Is it a frequency, a wave? What is a signal?
It's actually a harmonic.
Which is a what?
Something harmonizing with itself.
But does it involve waves and sounds?
No, not sounds, but it involves frequencies. But once again, you look at frequencies in the brain and you think that the brain has something to do with healing. Maybe the brain is an effect of healing. May not be the cause. I don't know. Think of the assumptions we have. So, this stuff's published. You can look at the frequency of what happens in cycling. You can look at where in the brain cycling occurs. You can look. And I'm just telling you that I don't even know that the brain is related to healing.
Well, you could take a brain dead person and no, I forget it. So what is you said the brains of the healer and the healee phase lock, but what about the healer and the cell, the disrupted cell that's being healed? They don't have a brain to phase lock.
Well, that's what I mean. So you can see pretty easily we don't know what we're talking about. It's really hard to do an EEG on a cell.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Just like I can't do a functional MRI on a mouse. I mean, you can, but it has to be knocked out. So that's not real helpful.
So what does phase lock mean again?
We're just linked. So if we were to do correlations between brain A and brain B on frequencies that are there are literally hundreds of them. So many when we do healing intention that you can say they're phase locked.
And what happens, like right now when we're chatting, we're not in a healing intention. Are we phase locked, you and I?
I don't know.
Our brains?
I'd have to hook you up to all sorts of fancy stuff and find out. I don't know, but I'm cycling now.
Yeah, because you cycle all the time.
Because I cycle all the time, but I'm not distracted. I'm not shutting down this part of my brain or that part of my brain. I'm just cycling. So
what do the EEGs and the MRI show when the healing process is going on?
Well, you get a unique signal. You get the healer and the healee to phase lock brains. We also phase lock hearts, but that's old news. When you do a functional MRI, you see that healing intention, at least by my technique, doesn't have a specific localized bundle of neurons. It floats around the brain. So sometimes it's here and sometimes it's there, and it's floating all over the place.
Interesting.
So it's not a right hemisphere thing. It's not a left hemisphere thing. It's a
Whole brain.
something happens. I don't know if it's a whole brain or part of the brain, or again, I don't even know if brains are part of healing.
Well, when you measure the heart rate variability during the healing process, does anything pop out?
I've never done heart rate variability. I've done linkages of hearts just with synchronized EKGs, and they just, the hearts beat together.
Well, does that happen with the mice and the human as well as human?
Never hooked up a mouse to an EKG.
All right.
And if they did link together, one of the two organisms would die because mice have an extremely high metabolic rate. And so if your heart beat at the rate of a mouse, you'd explode. If they beat at your rate, they'd die. Yeah, so I hope they don't sink.
Right, right. So you said that there's like 68 genetic changes in cancer cells as a result of the healing intention. A spleen grew by 500%. The immune system gets triggered. Are all those gene changes beneficial, or can some of them be like aberrant ones?
Don't know enough yet. Don't know enough. Something happens biologically, but there's no. When you're doing genomic studies, you're talking about this changes or that changes, but frankly, the entire genome is alive. So it's not a still picture. Life is not still. Everything's moving somehow. So very, very cautiously. At the very least, we've demonstrated that the recording of healing intention is storable to some extent. How replicable it is to a human healer, it's too early to tell. If it produces cures in the mice and produces cures in people and produces cures in people of a variety of conditions, it would be, from your point of view, interesting in the sense that it's useful, but I can tell you now that if it works, I will have no way to explain it.
When you do cycling, you focus on things you want. But let's say that I focused on makes of cars or types of architecture or something neutral. Do you think it would have the same effect, or does it have to be, I want this?
I don't think it would have the same effect.
So it's like I want sends a message of I want you to heal. It builds on that.
I think it's a projection into a potential future.
So it's like remote viewers can read a target before it's even selected because it's a probable outcome?
No, I don't think it's because it's a probable outcome, but remote viewing doesn't show a whole lot of respect for time or distance. Cycling should be only in the future.
Should be. What does that mean?
Everything on your list should not now exist.
Oh, okay. I get it. Oh, I see. So it's creating a kind of energy field, which you probably wouldn't like that word, of I want this to happen in the future. So that hooks in with I want this mouse or cell to heal. That makes sense.
Yeah, except that you don't need a whole lot of healing intention. Healing seems to happen. I don't know the relationship between cycling and healing at all.
Do you get lots of people saying, Dr. Bengston, I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, heal me?
Yeah, I do. And I have folks who I've trained who do it. So if someone sends a request for healing, I have people who are clinicians. I'm not a particularly good clinician, and then the other folks do the treating. I would recommend, also fix it yourself
by doing cycling.
Yeah, I had a guy recently with. I mean, it's just an anecdote. So let's just say he had a very serious, life-threatening condition. He treated water and he drank the water. He doesn't have it anymore. So it is alleged.
That's great.
Yeah.
You said that the technique works really well on removal, like removing cancer cells, removing plaque from an Alzheimer's brain. Are you working on something that's additive, like dopamine for Parkinson's disease?
I'm not working specifically on it right now. Right now, I'm trying to get a lab to finish my animal tests on this recording. But I would certainly want to do that. But I've never done a formal experiment. All I have is clinical experience on something like Parkinson's, and nothing of particular interest occurs. So I'd like to take that into the lab and test it, under more stringent conditions.
Um, there's a biology lab at California State University at Chico where I am. Should I ask them if they like to do a wonderful experiment?
Yeah, that'd be fine. They're going to say no, but go ahead. I've already poked at 4 of the UC system campuses.
This is CSU. It's a step down.
Yeah, if they'll do it, I'll be there tomorrow.
Okay. I'll. Do you think I should do biology or chemistry, or what would be the best lab for you?
Oh, I don't even need a big space. I need a space that's 6 feet by 3 feet. If I had a space 6 feet by 3 feet, and somebody to inject mice and to draw blood from mice, I need about 6 weeks.
You know what? I'm going to call the nurses. There's a really good nursing department.
I'm happy.
Okay.
And I'm bringing in funds.
Okay. I'm calling the nursing department when I get off this.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like people to know that we haven't talked about? That's a stupid question, but you know what I mean.
No, I think what everybody should know is nobody knows what they're talking about.
Got it.
Including me.
Got it.
So don't latch on to simple ideas. If you're actually serious, don't latch on to simple ideas. Don't latch on to simple patterns. Don't trust that anybody is sufficiently far that they really understand what's going on. So you say that there's some praise for my stuff. I can tell you after doing this for 200 years that the more I know I don't know.
Well, that's exciting. We're never bored.
It's fun. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
It's not boring.
I don't like the delusion of illusion.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm